US Lit Day 9, Extremely Loud, Incredibly Close, Day 1. When I stopped in school the other day, I had Miss Todd told me that there were some requests to show Alex on camera, and so tonight I'm going to let him do the explanation of the book. Alright, so if you could, whoa, because he's so new to the earth, sometimes his eyes aren't all that steady and he can't really focus them all that well. So if you could open up your books to the beginning. So, a number of different things about Oscar. I like the character of Oscar. I think that he's very, very smart, and one of the things we're going to be talking about as we read this book is he too smart for being the age he is? So we'll get into that a little bit more. Oscar likes to invent things. And so, the first page or two where he's talking about the tea kettle and who can sing the songs like his dad and training his anus to talk and all these different things, we'll learn more about why he invents things, but that's one of the things he does throughout the whole book. Oscar also uses a lot of different expressions, like what the and Jose. Jose is short for no way, Jose. So sometimes he says that when he actually doesn't believe something. One of the things I really like about this book, and the more times I teach it, the more things I kind of pick up on, are baby cross-eyed, baby with a mustache. Just like my dad was when he was born, I'm born because I'm Alex with a mustache. Whoa, oh. Yeah, sometimes when babies are born, their eyes aren't locked into their skull. You've heard about like the soft part of their skull. Sometimes their whole skull is soft and their eyes just kind of float around. Whoa. Anyway, one of the things I like about this book is the author puts lots and lots of just little connections, little tiny things that kind of show up over and over, different character traits that show up in different family members and various things. On page 3, we get the first thing. Even before that, I guess, I really like the self-defense class with Sensei Mark, and you got one of my absolute favorite quiz questions of what did Sensei Mark ask Oscar to do to him. It's one of my favorites. Anyway, on page 3, the play of Hamlet is going to show up a number of times in this book. We'll talk about Hamlet as we get into this a little bit, but Hamlet's a really intense play, kind of about what's the point of living. A real short version of this is Hamlet's father was killed by his brother, and his brother then married Hamlet's mother. Okay, and so in the very beginning of the play, Hamlet is visited by the ghost of his father, who basically asks him to... Where did my mouth go? Whoa. There we go. Asks him to avenge his death with his brother. Anyway, and one of the very famous scenes that that is the to be or to not to be scene. And on page 3, Oscar says, anyway, the fascinating thing was that I read in National Geographic that there are more people alive now than have died in all of human history. In other words, if everyone wanted to play Hamlet at once, they couldn't because there aren't enough skulls. There's a very famous scene where Hamlet holds up a skull and he starts to talk to him, which that scene in the play is going to get acted out in this book a little bit later. Go forward a little bit to page 5, please. As I said, they're good writers, and I think Jonathan Safran Foer, who is my age, or rather my dad's age, because I'm Alex, but my dad, Mr. Kruger, or Nick, as I call him. Nick, get me some milk. Nick, change my poopy diaper. Anyway, on page 5, we learned some things about Oscar, and this is just by a quote. So he's talking to the limo driver, Gerald. Now that I'm thinking about it, I told Gerald, they could make an incredibly long limousine that had its back seat at your mom's VJ and its front seat at your mausoleum, and it would be as long as your life. Gerald said, yeah, but if everyone lived like that, no one would ever meet anyone, right? I said, so? Okay, so it's a lot of little things like that, so pay attention to what people say and why they say it. People talk about whether it's important or necessary to study literature. And I think, it typically won't be something that makes you money, but there are many different instances in different careers where being able to think about what someone said to you and why they said it is really, really important. And particularly if you're going into business. Being able to think about the words that you use when you talk to someone and the effect that how someone that is listening to what you're saying is going to interpret those words is really important. And being able to kind of, read the subtext and read the underlying message of what someone is saying to you can be a very valuable thing. Going forward a little bit, on page 6, so another little thing that expression that Oscar uses, and so this is when Oscar was telling his mother that he made copies of his key for all these various people, including the mail lady and the Greenpeace people and the Pizza Hut man and all various things. I moved over to grandmother's side of the limousine and told Mom, why would I need a key to her apartment? She could tell that I was zipping up the sleeping bag of myself, and I could tell that she didn't really love me. I knew the truth, which is that if she could have chosen, it would have been my funeral we were driving to. So several things about that. Zipping up the sleeping bag of myself is how Oscar describes himself when he just kind of shuts down. And I think it's a good way of describing someone, because if you imagine someone just zipping themselves up inside a sleeping bag and you can't see their face and they can't see you, that's kind of what he's doing in his mind. He's kind of just withdrawing, and so he's not going to really respond very much to what Mom's saying. And one of the other big things in this book is we learn things along with the characters. This book is about communication a lot, and as I said, we learn things along with the characters, and the characters don't really know what other characters are thinking because they don't talk about it. And so it's a good example of postmodernism, because traditionally, literature, we would get an omniscient narrator who could tell us what all these different characters are thinking. But we don't have that. And so we get, in this chapter, a view from Oscar's perspective. And because Oscar hasn't talked to his mom about these things, and if you've ever been in a situation with grief, sometimes it is hard to talk about these things. Things which are very difficult and very challenging. He doesn't really know what she's thinking. Going on a little bit to page 8, we get this nice little scene with Oscar and his father. So Oscar's father is not in the book all that much, but the scenes he is, we get the sense that he was a really neat person. And one of the opening parts of this book is this reconnaissance expedition. Central Park is a very, very large place. And basically what his dad said is gave him a map of Central Park. And that was the clue. I said, and? And he said, and what? I said, what are the clues? He said, who said there had to be clues? There are always clues. That doesn't in itself suggest anything? Not a single clue? He said, unless no clues is a clue. Is no clues a clue? He shrugged his shoulders like he had no idea what I was talking about. I loved that. Now, we learn a lot about Oscar from this, because my guess is if a lot of you were just given a map of Central Park and said, there's no clues, go find it, whatever it is, you would say, forget you, and throw the map back at the person. But Oscar goes and starts looking, and he investigates everything he can find. He looks on every lamppost, he looks under trees, he looks everywhere, and he just tries to find what he can find. He comes back that night, and his dad was, whoa, what happened to my face? That was, somehow you could see the refrigerator through my face. I think that's that soft spot in the baby's head again. That must have been a really soft spot, because you could see all the way through my skull. Anyway, on page 9, he comes back, and his dad is reading the New York Times and marking the mistakes with a red pen. And Oscar says, but if you don't tell me anything, how can I ever be right? He circled something in the article and said, another way of looking at it would be, how could you ever be wrong? Okay, so I want you to keep these kind of clues in mind, and it's, whoa, there we go. This little introductory explanation of this reconnaissance expedition is going to tell us a lot about Oscar, and it's also going to give us some insight into Oscar's personality and explain why he's going to do what he's going to do as we get into the book a little bit. So kind of keep that in mind. Go to page 11, and I mentioned to you the other day about writing the anonymous letter to the class. And on page 11, a few weeks after the worst day, which was September 11th, I started writing a lot of letters. I don't know why, but it was one of the only things that made my boots lighter. That's another expression Oscar uses, and I think this is a really good one. When Oscar's really sad, he describes it as, my boots are really heavy. Okay, so something which would make his boots lighter would be something which would make him feel a little bit better. And writing a lot of letters to people was something that made him feel a little bit better. And I've heard this experience from other students who have read the book and then written the anonymous letter to the class in their evaluations to me at the end, that they said they were really happy to be able to say the things to the class that they did, because they'd never really gotten that chance before, and it did make them feel better to be able to do that. So keep thinking about what it is you want to say in your letter. The more time you spend thinking about it, the better it will be. Page 12 and 13 at the bottom of the page, so we get another story of Oscar and his dad, and this was the night before Oscar's dad was killed on 9/11. And Oscar says, I asked him if the world was a flat plate supported on the back of a giant tortoise. Excuse me? It's just that, why does the Earth stay in place instead of falling through the universe? Is this Oscar I'm tucking in? Has an alien stolen his brain for experimentation? I said, we don't believe in aliens. He said, the Earth does fall through the universe. You know that, buddy. It's constantly falling toward the sun. That's what it means to orbit. So I said, obviously, but why is there gravity? He said, what do you mean? I said, why is there gravity? What's the reason? Who said there had to be a reason? No one did, exactly. My question was rhetorical. What's that mean? It means I wasn't asking it for an answer, but to make a point. Oscar says, what point? Oscar's dad says, that there doesn't have to be a reason. Oscar says, but if there isn't a reason, then why does the universe exist at all? Dad says, because of sympathetic conditions. Oscar, so then why am I your son? Because Mom and I made love, and one of my sperm fertilized one of her eggs. Oscar, excuse me while I regurgitate. Dad, don't act your age. Oscar, well, what I don't get is, why do we exist? I don't mean how, but why? I watched the fireflies of his thoughts orbit his head. I love lines like that in this book. He said, we exist because we exist. What the? We could imagine all sorts of universes unlike this one, but this is the one that happened. I understand what he meant, and I didn't disagree with him, but I didn't agree with him either. Just because you're an atheist doesn't mean you wouldn't love for things to have reasons for why they are. Throughout most of the book, Oscar's going to be looking for reasons. Okay, and sometimes things happen for which there are no reasons. Just like why we're here, necessarily, and that's according to Oscar's dad. Going forward a little bit to page 14 and 15. On page 14, right before Oscar falls asleep on the night before his father's killed, the last thing he says to his dad is this. He kissed my forehead and said good night, and then he was at the door. Dad? Yeah, buddy? Nothing. Okay, so that word nothing is going to come up a lot in this book. Okay, and it's an important one. Then we cut to September 11th when Oscar gets home, and he's home alone, and he walks by, and this was, back in 2001 when there were still kind of answering machines. Some of you still may have answering machines, but I think most people use, just voicemail on their cell phones or even voicemail on their phones at home. But he walks by and sees 4 voicemail messages, and then he sees the phone ringing. I looked at the caller ID, and I saw that it was him. Okay, so Oscar's home alone. He sees 4 voicemail messages from his father, and the 5th time he calls, he sees it's his dad. Going forward, and we'll stop there, and I will do the next chapter. I will let my dad do the next